so much, Jay, for finding the time in your busy calendar and joining the Channel Inside podcast again. It's exactly 1 year since we met when we talked about MSP predictions for 2025, and a lot of insights came true. Obviously, all your visionary insights are fantastic, and I can't wait to talk to you about what the 2026 is looking for the partner ecosystem, for the partner evolution and strategy. What should the channel chiefs be prioritizing this year?
Well, yeah. If you look last year, we had a great year. We predicted double-digit growth in managed services, and that ended up happening. The interesting thing about 2026, with all the geopolitical and economic and other headwinds that we are expecting and in the middle of, we're expecting the entire industry to go up by double digits this year. So the ability for managed service providers, managed security solution providers, the industry as a whole, to find new areas to manage. The one constant from last year that continues this year is that customers are struggling to find the talent in AI. They're struggling to find the talent in cybersecurity, infrastructure, data center, all the way down the list. We're at kind of year 3 now of an AI era, a 20-year era. And as companies are building, this is make or break for them, our end clients. I remind people that, if you look over the course of 20 years, what these eras are, 53% of our biggest clients, the Fortune 500, do not make it through a 20-year cycle. So when you're at this stage, this isn't something, the AI era is something you couldn't sit out. The cloud era for 20 years is something businesses could not sit out. The client server era from 1981, for 20 years isn't something that anyone could have sat out and not modernized. So in these eras, the rule on managed services is, can we help our clients augment the talent, the skills, the competencies, bringing in the certifications, getting them to their best outcome, to the right side of the 50-50 chance they have of making it through. And that's just at the very top. We have smaller customers have a much worse chance of making it through 20 years.
It's fantastic you mentioned about it, and you started our discussions with the talent gap. Actually, it kind of ties in with the question I plan to ask you about redundancies. It's this kind of sad topic where a lot of people are restructuring their businesses, maybe closing down, maybe expanding to other geographies. So what would your advice be for somebody who's undergoing for this, who face the redundancies? We have amazing talent out there, but we are also new to AI, whether it's a new professionals joining the industry or the veterans. What should they focus on?
Yeah, it's easy in AI to kind of boil the ocean. Every day you're reading about NVIDIA or OpenAI or Anthropic or somebody making a $100 billion deal here or $1 trillion deal there. And most of the success of AI in the first couple of years has been consumer. So the most valuable company in the world is NVIDIA. The richest person in the world is Elon Musk. The tides have changed. Sometimes we, if we're not careful, we can start spending too much time on the consumer side of things. And if you focus on B2B, it's actually been quite disappointing. MIT wrote a report late last year that 95% of pilots or proof of concepts or factory work have not turned into real ROI. I mean, they only talked to 52 people, so they got criticized for that. But Accenture came in and said, listen, our numbers are closer to 90%. So yeah, I mean, customers on the B2B side are struggling to what an outcome is. How would you measure that? What would return on investment be? But it's one of these, we know we have to do it. We just don't have the guardrails and the guidelines on exactly what. So to answer your question, each of us individually, without boiling the ocean, think about our own roles, think about our own expertise, the swim lane that we're in, and go back to the day in the life. Think about every minute of the day. Think about every phone call. Think about every meeting. Think about every operational thing. Think through around us, the adjacencies, the people, the processes, the workflows, the business logic. Think through the programs, the technology. Think through all the different things we touch throughout the day and start thinking at a minimal level, not a macro level. How could I make this 10% better? is there something out there, and it could be a consumer tool, it could be a Copilot or an agent force or something that's plugged into the tools we're already using. It could be a consumer tool. Is there something, ChatGPT could plug into, or Anthropic, or Perplexity, or Grok, or one of these? But it's one of these, like, how do I drive 10% improvement in what I do? And the funny thing is, when we think and then expand that across the millions of people that are doing our roles and driving our business, this changes the game. That 10% could create billions or tens of billions of dollars of opportunities or efficiencies. It could send one vendor above another, one partner above another, one distributor above another. But that's the expertise we bring. No one knows how to do our role better than we do.
That's
And when
true.
we start to inspect, and when we start to break it down at that level of granularity, and look at all of the different innovation that's happening exactly in our swim lane, and be able to piece it together and then roll that out and share that and lift up the industry.
That's fantastic advice, really. Yeah, so, and I remember from watching multiple podcasts of yours about the fact that everything has a system in place. You do mention, that there is a system behind, and if we can improve, and be better in our swim lane, that's a great advice. I want to talk a little bit about services and software. I believe you mentioned that for every opportunity, for every product partner resells, they resell, let me just quote, as partners sell 2% of services for every dollar of the product. Could you tell about it more? Could you elaborate?
Yeah, one of the predictions we made last year that ended up becoming true is that in most categories of product where vendors participate, there's 35,000 vendors selling products in hardware, software, and all the pieces, cyber, and all the pieces underneath that, and telco. And so when you think about the services that surround it, last year it was $2 in services combined with every dollar of product. And we predicted those services were growing faster than the products themselves. So in many cases, partners were growing faster than the vendors that they partnered with, which is great. It goes back to our initial comments on this new buyer. So last year we went and we predicted, and it came true. This was an easy one, but demographically, the majority buyer in the tech and telco industry is now a millennial born after 1982. We know a bunch of things about their psychology, their behavior, their journey. We know they're digital first. We know they're integration first in terms of their buying criteria, but they're just highly digital. They love teams. They love surrounding themselves with smart people. So when we predicted, the average deal size of a medium or larger deal would have 7 partners, that sounds strange, coming from maybe baby boomers who wanted the single throat to choke and that single trusted advisor. Well, it's now a team sport, and it's not buying best of breed only product and then going with one company for everything. Maybe adding in B or C level product from that same company to have one label. What they're doing is buying best of breed of every layer. So what we saw last year, we predicted, and it came true again, that, every security deal, if it's larger, zero trust or SASE or medium NIST, whatever it is, it's 7 layers. And you could buy upwards of 7 different cyber companies to solve it. The average hyperscaler deal, AWS, Microsoft, Google, was 7 layers. The average SaaS deal, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, HubSpot, was 7 layers. The average TD SYNNEX and Ingram deal in distribution was 7 layers. So this idea that I'm going to buy best of breed at every layer. And I expect, the consulting, advisory, design, architecture, implementation, integration, and then managed services to come in and stitch all that best of breed together. That's why services outgrow product. And we published probably over 24 reports now for the biggest companies in the world. Just recently, CrowdStrike, and we've had AWS refresh theirs, and Microsoft and Google and everybody else is now doing these reports to say, as a partner, you can make upwards of $7. Like if you're a CrowdStrike partner, $7.05. If you're an AWS partner, $7.13. You could make a lot of money. So take that $2, move it to 3, move it to 4, move it to 5. And for a partner, this is consequential. You could double the size of your company just inside one of your partnerships. And now they're navigating, and we help with this. We go interview all the best partners in the world and, look at every deal they do and see what great looks like, and play it back to say what skills, what development, what program, and how do I go do this as a partner? And if I could go from 2 to 3, that's significant. And if I'm working on a $100,000 deal for vendor A, and I can bill out $300,000 of services at 70-80% margin, I want that all day long. And I want to find the vendors that can spin off these bigger multipliers. So we want services to, this year, we're actually predicting products to outgrow services, just because things like NVIDIA and things like, the major large language models and hyperscalers and things are swinging a little bit of the market. But we would love services to come back and outgrow everything just by finding these multiplication opportunities to help the customer more. And this isn't, this is to help the customer. And again, this new buyer, this new millennial aged buyer sees it as a win-win-win. The partners win, the vendors win in the 7-layer stack. They win because they keep their jobs and their companies stay on the right side of that failure number I gave you. It's this huge team sport. We're all in this together, and we're all in it to win. And there's, no losers in this ecosystem approach.
Absolutely. But are customers aware of this shift of 7 layers? Are they happy with this approach? This is a question for you. I'm sure you also speak with customers. What do they expect from the 7-layer services? Maybe it's too much to handle for them, or it's just something transparent.
Well, it's not, and they're not. It's not happening to them. They're wanting it. They're driving this difference. So I started my career 32 years ago. And I happened to come out of college and join IBM. And at the time, IBM was the biggest company in the world. And the saying for customers is you couldn't get fired for buying IBM.
Yeah. Famous.
So regardless of what would happen, and the same happened with Cisco, and there's other companies that, back in the day, you just don't get fired for buying them. And back then is you might even bring in a B or C level product just because it had that logo in the front. And there's obviously a lot of A-level product as well, but A, B, and C, and you end up managing a montage of stuff. And you thought by buying from one company, they would over-service you and things like that. But this changed through Gen X and really lit up during kind of the baby boomers. It says, I'm going to buy best of breed. I'm not going to ever buy a B or C level product. I'm only going to buy the best, which means that I'm not going to buy from one company. If, company A over here has, A-level product, but I'm going to add a layer of AI to it or security to it or backup to it or something to it, I'm going to go out to the market again. I'm going to go ask the 7 partners that I trust the most, who is the best? And I expect them to have great integration. I expect partners to do the implementation and the integration work, and the managed services people that are there every 30 days forever to stitch this best of breed. Because if I build this environment of best of breed, I'm going to be better than my competitor, because my job now isn't to get fired for buying one brand. I'm trying not to get fired by building something that's 10 to 20% better than my competitors. And I want this team of services professionals. I want this team of great vendors, best of breed in every layer. And I'm okay with this complexity. 7 layers over here, 7 layers over here. The average buying committee, by the way, of a large enterprise is 13 people. So now 13 plus 7 plus 7, there's 27 things going on. So this orchestration of complexity and stuff like that, but this is how, in their mind, you don't get fired in this new generation. And in AI, it's even getting bigger. The 7 is going to be 8, it's going to be 9, it's going to be 10. This is why services continue to be a huge piece of how customers are successful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this insight. I just want to also talk a little bit about Stargate and AI infrastructure. I had a guest talking about this incredible opportunity for so many partners regarding a build out of AI infrastructure and data centers. Do you have anything to share regarding this data centers and what's awaiting for them, or what it means for us as a society?
Yeah, let me frame it up in numbers first. So this year in 2026, customers around the world, 193 countries, 297 industries, are going to buy close to $6.1 trillion of hardware, software, services, and telco. So our entire industry is 6.1 trillion. The entire world economy is 121 trillion. We make up about 5% of the world economy. Now, when you listen to people, for example, Microsoft, the CEO of Microsoft, or the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, They're talking about an AI build out. This, NVIDIA chips, data centers, Stargate, all these things. They're talking in the range of 6.5 to 7 trillion to do the build out for AI. Remember, a big chunk of that is consumer. But
Yeah.
the number that they're talking about in terms of how much infrastructure is going to have to go in from edge to cloud is bigger than our entire industry. Our industry has taken, 50 years to build to that number. It's been the fastest growing industry now for 50 straight years. But can you imagine in the next number of years, 3 to 5 years, building out something even bigger than our industry? That's why the richest companies, that's why the richest people, that's why we're going to create the first, trillionaires in this next generation. We have one very, very close already, but a lot of people look negatively upon that, but that's the opportunity that people are seizing. So anyone that is underestimating this next 20 years, is going to be on the wrong side of history. So now dial that back to partners. The actual opportunity for partners is much less than most people think. When I think about NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world and growing, last year at triple digits, many quarters, they sell direct. NVIDIA really has 7 major customers, which are the Magnificent Seven. The 3 hyperscalers, Facebook, Meta, they've got, Elon Musk. So they've got this Magnificent Seven group of, companies that are worth $3 and $4 trillion that are each spending hundreds of billions of dollars on infrastructure. None of that is resold. None of that goes through distribution. And in most cases, none of that is a partner opportunity in terms of who's bolting together these data centers.
Okay.
So the data center opportunity at the consumer scale happens outside pretty much of our channel. There is time and materials. There's people that are hired, subcontracted as these buildings go up and are constructed and things like that. But if you think there's a managed service provider hanging out at Google and hanging out at OpenAI and Anthropic and hanging out at Microsoft, they're not. They manage these things at scale. And whether the infrastructure sits at the bottom of the ocean, sits beside a nuclear reactor, now sits in space. I mean, there's not an MSP kind of in a space shuttle next to it, ready for something to fail. And this is a huge robotic thing. And now that's the, the big part of this. So this isn't going to have the same level of partner opportunity that, for example, would happen at the edge in client server in the past. So here's an interesting stat is that 99% of the world's business data, every flight you've ever taken, every banking transaction you've ever done, etc., every government inquiry you've ever had, all that business data, 99% of it has not been trained into models. This harkens back to that, 95% failure rate. Like it's very difficult and companies are taking kind of a slow approach, very worried about the risk, very worried about all kinds of things of hallucinations. And, it's one of these things, you're not going to dump your critical customer data until you prove out that it's secure, that you can prove out that these models, can really drive. But that's the end goal. Like 10 years from now, that changes everything. When that little chatbot comes on when they cancel your flight, today it's empathetic and it's very sorry that they canceled your flight. But I want it to be agentic. I want it out working with the Marriott and Uber to get me, the night and then come back at 5 a.m. for the next flight. Like I want it working on that, but I also want it to know my business data. I've got 50 years of flying. I want it to know that I don't do that. When they cancel my flight, I want you to get me on another flight somewhere within 6 hours where I live. Get me a Hertz rental and I'm going to drive to see my kids. So I'm not going to wait till the 5 o'clock the next morning. I'm going to be home by 5 o'clock the next morning. So I need the agent to understand that. And that's my business data. And then the agentic model to be able to go and work behind the scenes. So when they cancel my flight, I already have the new flight. I already have the Hertz rental. And I already have, my family on the line notifying them that, hey, this snowstorm has caused a problem. But guess what? I'm still taking you to school tomorrow.
But it will. You're saying you want it and it will happen.
That's the 10-year. But the airlines aren't ready to lift. Like every flight you've ever taken sits on a 1964 Sabre system. So they're not ready to lift that business data and add it to the chatbot. They haven't worked on the integrations yet. So the chatbot can talk to the Marriott and the Hilton, the Uber can talk to Hertz. That's the integration work where partners shine. This is the $2 turning to $3. that in an integration first world, I need this chatbot that's very empathetic about, canceling my flight, or empathetic about declining my credit card due to fraud alert or something, or whatever it is. I need more than empathy. I need you to be fixing the problem, whatever that takes. So that's the promise of AI. 83% of the world's business data, all the flights I've taken, are in cold storage at the edge. So here's what's interesting is how much of that data is going to get forklifted into public clouds, kind of outside of the realm of partners, and how much of that's going to work at the edge. And we're seeing now with sovereign IT, country by country, people want that in country. But, from businesses perspective, you might see start to shift that says, I'm not ready to just dethaw that storage and send it to the cloud. It's very expensive. And ongoing, it's very expensive. So if I'm going to train and tune models, let them ingest this, let them build out the insights, that could be somewhere close to hybrid, virtualized edge, data centers around the customer. I may dethaw that at the customer site. Now, if that happens, the opportunity for partners, there's another $1 trillion in services that could get triggered in this decade. If that swing is closer. And all the three hyperscalers all got up and promised their partners that most of the work would be done at the edge. And I'm not sure, because as we're looking at this and just knowing these companies, they're probably going to convince them over time that your data ought to revolve, ought to be near the large language models. And if that happens, that'll be closer, in these bigger data centers outside of the partner opportunity. So this is the biggest question for the next, decade is where from edge to cloud does that actual promise of AI happen? And if it happens in one place, we're going to create a lot of billionaires. We're going to create some ridiculously high valued companies. If it all goes back and Microsoft becomes the first $10 trillion company and NVIDIA, keeps doubling in size and things like that, then there's where the trillionaires are going to be there. But the general industry itself doesn't rise at the same level.
Fantastic. So many opportunities on so many different levels. Just before we close off our discussion, what is your personal goal for this year? I'm just so curious to hear and share it with my audience.
Yeah, personally, with my family, we've traveled to 106 countries and we keep going to really cool places like Antarctica and Africa. I just came back from the Galapagos. That's, my personal goal is I think go to Asia Pacific again this summer and explore some new countries we haven't been to, like maybe Papua New Guinea and a few. On the professional side, Canalys got acquired by Omdia, which is part of Informa TechTarget. Now we're a couple of years kind of in, but we've rebranded ourselves, and professionally, Informa TechTarget is a buyer intent company. It understands signals. We understand that those 7 partners are a key part of that. If we can introduce partnerships into the moments before the sale, the 28 moments before a customer makes a decision, and now marketers and salespeople and even CX people will have the partner data, and these agentic models will have so much more about the deal. Informa TechTarget is a key company, public company on the NASDAQ that could make that happen. Our job, our channel job inside this bigger company is to make sure the channel moments, the partner moments, the alliance moments, the ecosystem moments, the integration moments, hundreds of moments, co-sell moments, co-marketing moments. Got to make sure those moments show up in other people's systems.
Yeah.
And make sure that all boats rise in the company and everybody looks to the partner professionals, say, hey, I can't do my job without you. Back to, I don't want to get fired. I'm going to get fired as a CMO or CRO if I don't have my partner professional by my side day in and day out.
Fantastic. That's precisely what I wanted to say, and how I wanted to what I wanted to conclude, that we need your company, we need your research, and we need to keep continuing speaking to yourself, speaking to your company, and get all these insights to be part of this great opportunity. Thank you so much, Jay, for your time, for your insights. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and hopefully to speak to you next year now. It's
Absolutely.
our tradition.
Let's set the date.